Welcome to the Stories for Sleep channel. We are setting off on a fascinating journey through the centuries of the past and the events of the present so that you fall asleep peacefully and with new knowledge. Subscribe and like right now because by the end of the story, you will be sound asleep. Close your eyes. The story begins right now. In the beginning, there was chaos, the cosmogony of Hesiod in the Theogony. Long ago, the cosmogony of Hesiod in the Theogony, in an era when the world had not yet acquired its forms and the gods were only beginning to awaken from the abyss, lived a poet named Hesiod. He was a simple shepherd from Boeotia, grazing sheep at the foot of the sacred Mount Helicon. But one day, as he himself recounts in his poem, The Theogony, the birth of the gods, the Muses appeared to him, the 9 daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory. They breathed into him the gift of song and commanded him to tell the world about the origin of all existence. The Theogony is not just a list of the names of the gods, but a grandiose epic about cosmogony, about how the cosmos was born from the primordial emptiness, how the forces of nature arose, how the gods fought for power, and how order was established in the universe. This is an ancient Greek myth that explains why the world is the way it is, full of harmony and chaos, love and cruelty, light and darkness. Let us immerse ourselves in this story step by step, following the words of Hesiod to feel the breath of antiquity. In the very beginning, before the earth, the sky, or the ocean appeared, there was only chaos. Do not confuse it with the modern concept of disorder. In the Greek myth, chaos was the bottomless void, a gaping chasm where there was neither form, nor time, nor light. It was the primordial abyss from which everything was meant to be born. Hesiod describes chaos as something eternal and infinite, having neither beginning nor end. From this emptiness, as if from a seed, the first entities of the universe sprouted. The first to emerge from chaos were Gaia, the wide-chested earth, the solid and fertile foundation of all existence; Tartarus, the gloomy, misty underworld, lying in the depths below the roots of the earth; and Eros, the force of love and desire, which bound everything together, prompting reproduction and creation. Eros was not the cute Cupid with a bow, but a mighty, untamable force without which nothing could unite. Following them, Erebus, the embodiment of primordial darkness, thick and impenetrable, and Nyx, Black Night, the sister and wife of Erebus, were born. Together they personified the darkness that enveloped the universe before the appearance of light. But even in this darkness, life continued to pulsate. Nyx and Erebus, uniting in the embrace of Eros, gave birth to ether, the pure, radiant upper air which became the basis of celestial light, and Hemera, the bright and clear day, which dispelled the darkness. Thus, the change of day and night appeared in the world, the eternal cycle that we observe to this day. Hesiod emphasizes that these births occurred without the intervention of the gods. It was a spontaneous force of nature, where each new being was born from the previous one, like a branch on a tree. Now Gaia, the earth, did not remain alone. She, being the mother of all, bore from herself Uranos, starry sky, who stretched over her like a mantle, equal to her in size. Uranos became her consort, and their union was fruitful. From Gaia and Uranos came the mountains, high and inaccessible. Ure and Pontus, the salty, stormy sea which spread across the edges of the earth, knowing no rest. But most importantly, their children, the first gods full of strength and might, were born. Gaia and Uranos gave birth to 12 titans, 6 sons, Oceanus, Caius, Creus, Hyperion, Iapetus, and Kronos, the youngest and most cunning, and 6 daughters, Thea, Rhea, Themis, Memnosine, Phoebe, and Tethys. The Titans were huge, immortal beings personifying the fundamental forces of nature. Oceanus, the great flow encircling the world. Hyperion, the light of the sun. Kronos, time, irrelevant and consuming. But not only the Titans were born from this union.
Gaia and Uranos also gave life to other stranger creatures. Among them were the 3 Cyclopes, one-eyed giant smiths, Brontes, Steropes, and Argus, whose names meant thunder, lightning, and bright light. They possessed immense strength and skill in forging metals. Then appeared the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed giants, Cotys, Briareus, and Gyges, each with 50 heads and 100 hands, capable of hurling rocks and shaking the earth. These creatures were the embodiment of chaotic power, indomitable and frightening. However, harmony in this primordial world was short-lived. Uranos, the sky, feared his children, their strength and number. He saw them as a threat to his power, and to secure himself, he hid the newborns back into Gaia's womb, into the depths of the earth. Gaia groaned with pain and anger. Her body was tearing from these prisoners. Finally, she could not endure it and gathered her children, the Titans, to overthrow the tyrant father. "My children," she appealed, "who among you dares to raise a hand against your father to avenge me?" All the Titans were silent in fear, except for Cronus, the youngest and bravest. "I will do it, mother," he said. "I hate the father who begot us, but holds us in chains." Gaia gave Cronus a sickle made of adamantine, an indestructible metal, sharp as a razor. When Uranos once again descended to Gaia, full of desire, Cronus ambushed him. With the help of his brothers, who held their father down, Cronus cut off Uranos's procreative power with one blow. From the blood spilled on the earth, the myth says, new creatures were born, the Erinnyes, goddesses of vengeance with snakes instead of hair and whips in their hands, the giants, warring giants in armor, and the Malei, the ash tree nymphs. The severed power fell into the sea, and from the foam, Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, was born, whose birth brought charm and passion into the world. Uranos, shedding blood, cursed Cronus and predicted that he too would be overthrown by his own son, just as he had overthrown his father. Thus, Cronus became the new king of the gods. He freed his brothers and sisters, but the fear of Uranos's prophecy poisoned his mind. He married his sister Rhea, and they began to have children: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and finally, Zeus. According to the myth, Cronus devoured each newborn heir, seeking to prevent the prophecy from being fulfilled. Rhea suffered, watching her children disappear into the jaws of her husband. When it was time to give birth to Zeus, she cunningly tricked Cronus, wrapping a stone in swaddling clothes and giving it to him to swallow. The real Zeus was hidden on the island of Crete, in a cave, where he was nurtured by nymphs and the goat Amalthea. Zeus grew up strong and wise, and with the help of Gaia and Metis, the goddess of cunning, he gave Cronus an emetic potion. Cronus vomited up all the swallowed children, who were now adult gods, and together they rose up against the Titans. This led to the Great War, the Titanomachy. Zeus freed the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires from Tartarus, where Cronus had imprisoned them. The Cyclopes forged lightning for Zeus, the trident for Poseidon, and the helmet of invisibility for Hades. The Hecatoncheires hurled rocks at the Titans. After 10 years of battle, the Olympians won. Zeus cast the Titans, including Cronus, into Tartarus, where the Hecatoncheires guarded them. Zeus divided the world, the sky to himself, the seas to Poseidon, the underworld to Hades, and the earth remained common. But the cosmogony did not end there. Gaia, enraged by the Titans' defeat, bore the monster Typhon from Tartarus, a 100-headed dragon with fiery breath. Typhon attacked Zeus, but he struck him down with thunderbolts, and Typhon was buried under Mount Etna, where his roar causes earthquakes. Zeus, to solidify his power, married Metis, but, learning of the prophecy that a son born from her would overthrow him, he swallowed his pregnant wife. Later, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, was born from his head, fully armed. Thus concludes the cosmogony of Hesiod. From chaos, order is born, but it is full of struggle and succession. The Theogony teaches that the world is an eternal cycle of birth, conflict, and rebirth, where even the gods submit to fate. This myth influenced all of Western culture, from Roman poets to modern stories about gods and heroes. In it, we see a reflection of human fears, fear of children, the lust for power, and the hope for justice. The Titans and their fall, the war of the gods in ancient Greece. At the heart of ancient Greek mythology, where the forces of nature acquire faces and voices, lies the epic saga of the Titans, the mighty firstborn of the universe whose power was brief and whose fall was inevitable. This myth, detailed in Hesiod's Theogony and echoed in the works of Apollodorus and Ovid, tells of the struggle of generations of gods, where sons rise against fathers and harmony is born from the chaos of war. The Titans symbolize the ancient, untamable forces, oceans, time, light, and memory. Their fall is not just a defeat, but a transition from primordial disorder to Olympian order, where Zeus and his brothers establish a new world order. Let us dive into this story, full of intrigue, betrayal, and grandiose battles, to understand how the shadows of the Titans still fall upon our world. The Titans, these colossal beings, were the first to embody the majesty of the cosmos. There were 12 of them, 6 brothers and 6 sisters, each ruling their own sphere. Oceanus, the eldest, encircled the world with a ring of water, creating boundaries between the known and the unknown. Coeus embodied the axis of the world around which the heavens rotated. Crius governed the southern winds and constellations. Hyperion was the father of the sun, moon, and dawn, giving light and warmth. Iapetus, the ancestor of humanity through his son Prometheus. And Cronus, the youngest but the most ambitious, became their leader. The Titan sisters were no less majestic. Theia, the shining goddess, mother of the celestial luminaries. Rhea, the fertile queen, symbolizing motherhood. Themis, the embodiment of law and justice. Mnemosyne, the keeper of memory, mother of the muses. Phoebe, the oracle, associated with prophecies. And Tethys, the sea goddess, wife of Oceanus. Their reign began with an act of violence that determined their fate. Cronus, armed with the sickle given by Mother Earth, overthrew his father Uranus. But this rebellion did not bring peace. Becoming king, Cronus married Rhea, and their union could have been the foundation of a golden age. However, the curse of the overthrown father echoed in his ears. Your son will overthrow you, just as you overthrew me. Paranoia seized Cronus. Every time Rhea gave birth to a child, he snatched the infant and swallowed him whole, locking them in his belly as if in a dungeon. Thus disappeared Hestia, goddess of the hearth, Demeter, patroness of the harvest, Hera, future queen of the heavens, Hades, lord of the dead, and Poseidon, ruler of the seas. Rhea, torn by grief, saw in her husband a tyrant, not a lover. But fate does not tolerate eternal oppression. When Rhea became pregnant for the 6th time, she turned to her parents, Earth and Sky, for help.
They advised her to hide on Crete in the sacred cave of Mount Dicte. There she gave birth to Zeus, the Thunderer, the future king of the gods. To deceive Cronus, Rhea wrapped the stone in swaddling cloths and presented it to him as the child. Cronus, blinded by fear, swallowed the deception, unaware of the substitution. Zeus grew up in secret, nursed by the milk of the goat Amalthea, whose horns later became the horn of plenty. The curates, warlike spirits, danced and beat their shields to drown out the baby's cries. Years passed and Zeus matured, full of strength and cunning. He knew about his brothers and sisters imprisoned in his father's belly and craved revenge. Zeus returned to Olympus incognito, disguised as a cupbearer. With the help of Metis, the goddess of wisdom and cunning, daughter of Oceanus and Tethys, he mixed an emetic potion of mustard and wine into Cronus's drink. Cronus, upon drinking it, vomited up all the swallowed children.
They were now adult gods, full of rage. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon joined Zeus, forming the alliance of the Olympians. But the Titans were not going to surrender without a fight. Cronus gathered his brothers and sisters, and the world split into two camps. The Titans established themselves on Mount Othryce, and the Olympians on Olympus. Thus began the Titanomachy, a 10-year war that shook the foundations of the universe. Hesiod describes it as a chaos where the earth groaned, the sky cracked, and the oceans boiled. The Titans, relying on their ancient might, hurled mountains and unleashed storms. Atlas, son of Iapetus, held the heavens on his shoulders, but was indomitable in battle. Menoetius, Atlas's brother, scattered lightning. Prometheus and Epimetheus, other sons of Iapetus, initially fought on the side of the Titans. But Prometheus, the forethinker, defected to Zeus, foreseeing the outcome. The Olympians were outnumbered, but Zeus sought allies. He descended into Tartarus, the gloomy underworld, and freed the imprisoned Cyclopes and Hecatonchires, the very ones Cronus had locked away out of fear. The Cyclopes, grateful for their freedom, forged the weapons of the gods for Zeus, the thunderbolts capable of splitting mountains, for Poseidon, the trident commanding the waves, for Hades, the helmet that makes one invisible. The Hecatonchires, with their 100 hands, became living catapults. Each of them, Briareus, Cottus, and Gyges, could hurl 100 rocks simultaneously, raining stones down upon the Titans. The battle reached its climax. Zeus hurled lightning from Olympus, illuminating the sky with flashes. Poseidon summoned tidal waves, drowning armies. Hades sowed terror from the shadows. The Titans resisted. Oceanus sent floods. Cronus manipulated time, slowing down his enemies. But the power of the Olympians grew. After 10 years of relentless fighting, the Titans fell. Cronus was defeated. His sickle, the symbol of the old power, was taken away. Zeus, as the supreme judge, condemned the vanquished. Most of the Titans were cast down into Tartarus, the bottomless abyss where eternal darkness and adamantine chains awaited them. The Hecatonchires became the guardians, preventing the prisoners from escaping. Atlas received a special punishment. He was doomed to eternally hold the sky upon his shoulders at the edge of the world so that it would not collapse onto the earth. However, not all Titanesses suffered. Those who did not participate in the war, such as Tethys and Mnemosyne, retained their freedom. Prometheus, an ally of Zeus, later suffered himself for stealing fire for humans, but that is another story. The fall of the Titans marked the end of the era of chaos and the beginning of the Olympian reign. Zeus divided the world, the sky and thunder to himself, the seas to Poseidon, the underworld to Hades. The earth and Olympus remained common. This myth teaches the cyclical nature of power. Each generation overthrows the previous one, but with the hope of a better order. In Greek culture, the Titans became symbols of the obsolete, primitive world. Their fall explains earthquakes, the groaning of the prisoners of Tartarus, and volcanoes, the breath of the defeated. Even in Roman mythology, where the Titans became Saturn and his kin, their story repeats itself. Prometheus and the fire for humans. A gift that cost freedom. In ancient Greek mythology, where gods and mortals intertwine in a dance of fate, shines the story of Prometheus, the Titan whose name means forethinker. This myth, immortalized in Aeschylus's tragedy, Prometheus Bound, and mentioned in the works of Hesiod, tells of a rebellion against divine tyranny, a gift that illuminated the path of humanity, and the price paid for compassion towards the weak. Prometheus was not just a rebel, he was a creator, protector, and martyr, whose act of stealing fire became a symbol of progress, sacrifice, and the eternal challenge to authority. This narrative is about how a spark of divine flame ignited civilization, but fueled the wrath of Zeus, king of Olympus.
Let us dive into this saga full of cunning, suffering, and triumph to see how one Titan changed the destiny of the human race. Prometheus, son of the Titan Iapetus and the Oceanid Clymene, possessed the gift of foresight. He could peer into the future, anticipating the outcomes of events. His brother, Epimetheus, in contrast, was strong with hindsight, always reflecting post factum. Together they represented two aspects of the human mind, planning and reflection. When the world of the gods stabilized after the great upheavals, Prometheus turned his gaze to the earth, where no intelligent beings yet existed. According to one version of the myth, it was Prometheus, at Zeus's instruction, who molded the first humans from clay mixed with water by the river. He breathed life into them, endowing them with a spark of the divine spirit, taken from Athena, the goddess of wisdom. Humans were fragile creatures, without fur, like beasts, without wings, like birds, without shells, like turtles. They wandered in darkness, hungry and helpless, not knowing how to protect themselves from the cold or prepare food. But Prometheus sought potential in humans. He became their patron, teaching them crafts, how to build houses, cultivate the land, and domesticate animals. He taught them astronomy to navigate by the stars, medicine to heal wounds, and mathematics to measure the world. However, Zeus, the supreme god, looked down on humans. To him they were mere toys, unworthy of equality with the immortals. The conflict erupted at Mecone, a sacred place in Boeotia, where gods and men gathered for the first joint sacrifice. Zeus decided to determine which part of the sacrifice belonged to the gods and which to the mortals. Prometheus, representing the humans, cunningly prepared the bull. He divided it into two piles. In one he placed the juicy meat and entrails, but concealed them under the skin and stomach, making the appearance unappetizing. In the second, he placed the bones and fat, but covered them with a glistening layer of fat to make them look appealing. Zeus, choosing, fell into the trap. Prometheus, son of the Iapetus, you are the craftiest of all, dividing unequally. But Prometheus smiled. Great Zeus, choose first, as befits the king. Zeus, suspecting a trick but unwilling to show weakness, took the beautiful pile, the bones under the fat. Discovering the deception, he exclaimed in fury, "Henceforth humans shall burn only bones and fat for the gods and eat the meat themselves." But his anger did not subside. In retaliation, Zeus took fire away from humans, the only gift that made them stronger. Without fire, humans reverted to a primitive state. They ate raw meat, froze in caves, and could not forge tools. Darkness and cold gripped the earth, and humanity was on the verge of extinction. Prometheus could not bear to watch the suffering of his creations. He decided to dare and steal the fire back. At night, when Olympus slept, Prometheus crept into the forge of Hephaestus, the smith god, where the eternal fire blazed. According to another version, he took a spark from the chariot of Helios, the sun god, as it raced across the sky. He hid the smoldering spark in the hollow stalk of a giant fennel, a plant that burns slowly without extinguishing. Descending from Olympus, Prometheus gave the fire to the humans. This was a turning point. With fire, humans learned to cook food, warm themselves, smelt metals, and create tools. Fire became a symbol of civilization. It lit the way to art, science, and society. Humans erected altars where fire burned in honor of the gods, but also in memory of the giver. Zeus, seeing the fires on earth, understood the betrayal. His wrath was terrible. "Prometheus, you dared to challenge me, the king of the gods. You gave mortals what belongs only to the immortals." He ordered Hephaestus, the god of fire and metalworking, to chain Prometheus to a rock at the edge of the world in the wild mountains of the Caucasus. Hephaestus, reluctantly obeying, for Prometheus was his friend, forged unbreakable chains of adamantine. Kratos, strength, and Bia, force, the servants of Zeus, helped chain the Titan. Prometheus hung on the rock, naked before the winds and snows, without food, drink, or sleep, for he was immortal.
But the punishment did not end there. Zeus sent an eagle, or according to some versions, a vulture born of Typhon and Echidna, to peck at Prometheus's liver every day. During the day, the eagle tore at the flesh, devouring the organ, and at night the liver regenerated so that the torment would repeat eternally. Prometheus screamed in pain, but did not break. He knew a secret that could overthrow Zeus, a prophecy that a son born from the sea goddess Thetis would be stronger than his father. Zeus, learning of this, sent Hermes, the messenger god, to coax the secret out, promising freedom. But Prometheus remained silent. "Let the fire of Zeus strike me, let the snow bury me. I will not betray humans." The torment lasted for millennia, according to some myths 30,000 years. Finally, salvation came from Heracles, the son of Zeus, during his 12 labors. Heracles, searching for the golden apples of the Hesperides, passed through the Caucasus. Seeing Prometheus's suffering, he took pity and struck down the eagle with an arrow from the Hydra's bow. Then he broke the chains, freeing the Titan. Zeus, respecting his son's feat, allowed the release. But so that the punishment would not be forgotten, Prometheus had to eternally wear an iron ring with a fragment of the rock and an eagle feather. In exchange, Prometheus revealed the secret. Zeus avoided the birth of a dangerous son by marrying Thetis to the mortal Peleus, from whom Achilles was born. This myth of Prometheus and the fire is a hymn to the human spirit. It explains why people sacrifice bones to the gods, why fire is sacred, and why the Caucasus is associated with suffering. In literature, Prometheus became the archetype of the rebel, from Shelley's Prometheus Unbound to modern interpretations in science and art. His gift is not just flame, but the spark of reason that distinguishes. The myth of Pandora, the box that opened the world's woes. In the depths of ancient Greek mythology, where the threads of mortal fate are woven, hides the story of Pandora, the first woman, created not from a rib or seed, but from clay and divine will. This myth, vividly described in Hesiod's poem Works and Days, serves as a warning about curiosity, deceit, and the inevitability of suffering in human life. Pandora was not born, but created as an exquisite trap, sent by Zeus to balance the scales after the gift that elevated humans. She became the embodiment of beauty mixed with guile, and her story explains why the world is full of sorrows, yet not devoid of the spark of hope. This tale is about how one act of curiosity unleashed all evil, but left humanity with one last comfort. Let us analyze this legend step by step to feel how the gods manipulate mortals like pieces on a chessboard. After humanity gained strength through the divine gift, Zeus, king of Olympus, seethed with anger. He saw humans flourishing and decided to inflict a punishment that would balance their progress. "Let mortals know the taste of misfortune," he decreed, "so that they remember their place beneath the heavens." Zeus convened a council of the gods and commanded the creation of a being that would be both a blessing and a curse. First, he turned to Hephaestus, the lame smith god, whose hands formed miracles in his volcanic forge. "Mold a woman from earth and water," Zeus commanded. "Make her similar to the immortal goddesses, but with a mortal soul." Hephaestus, whose hammers forged lightning and armor, mixed clay with water by the stream and sculpted a figure of perfect beauty, slender with snowy facial features, graceful hands, and eyes full of mystery. He breathed life into her, making her the first among women, and named her Pandora, which means all gifted or giving everything. But the creation of Pandora was a collective act of divine craftsmanship. Each god contributed, bestowing gifts that seemed beneficial but concealed a catch. Athena Pallas, goddess of wisdom and crafts, dressed Pandora in silvery garments woven from the finest linen, decorated with embroidery of flowers and patterns. She taught her to weave, sew, and manage a household, making her an ideal keeper of the hearth.
Aphrodite, the queen of love, endowed Pandora with irresistible beauty, golden curls, a blush on her cheeks, a voice sweet as honey, and a gaze that captivated anyone. "Let men lose their minds at the sight of her," Aphrodite whispered, adding a charm bordering on temptation. The Graces, goddesses of elegance, crowned her head with a wreath of fresh flowers, and the Orae, keepers of the seasons, adorned her with necklaces of pearls and gold. However, not all gifts were bright. Hermes, the cunning messenger of the gods, by Zeus's command, placed a dog's soul and a thievish disposition in Pandora's spirit. He taught her flattering words, deceit, and curiosity that knows no bounds. "Let her speak lies hidden beneath the truth," said Hermes, making Pandora the embodiment of duplicity. Finally, Zeus himself presented her with a gift, a sealed jar, which in later versions of the myth became known as Pandora's box. It was a pithos, a large clay vessel, decorated with carvings, but concealing within it all the woes of the world: diseases, hunger, wars, old age, envy, madness, and death. Zeus strictly commanded her never to open it, knowing that curiosity would do its work. Created and gifted, Pandora was sent to Earth as a beautiful evil, Kalon Kakon, according to Hesiod. Zeus instructed Hermes to deliver her to Prometheus, the brother of the one who dared to defy the gods. Prometheus, whose name means wise after the event, lived among humans, helping them in their daily affairs. He had received a warning: "Do not accept gifts from Zeus, brother, for they bring ruin." But when Hermes appeared with Pandora, her beauty blinded Prometheus. Forgetting the advice, he accepted her as his wife, enchanted by her appearance and manners. Pandora entered the house, bringing with her the vessel, which she placed in a secluded spot. At first, their life seemed idyllic. Pandora managed the household, delighted the eye, and people marveled at the first woman, seeing in her a gift from the gods. But curiosity, the gift of Hermes, did not sleep. Day after day, Pandora pondered the vessel. What was hidden inside? Why did Zeus forbid opening it? Finally, unable to restrain herself, she lifted the lid. At that moment, a swarm of calamities rushed out of the pithos, formless shadows, wails, and groans. Diseases spread through the air, sowing plague and fever. Hunger devastated the fields. Wars ignited hatred between nations. Old age bent the backs of the young. Envy poisoned hearts. Madness clouded minds. All the evil that Zeus had locked in the vessel escaped, filling the world with suffering that had been unknown to humans before. Previously, humanity had lived in a golden age without disease or worry, but now every day became a struggle. In a panic, Pandora slammed the lid shut, but it was too late. All the woes had flown out, except for one. At the bottom of the vessel remained Olympus, hope, the only one that did not escape. According to one interpretation, she remained to comfort people in their sorrows. According to another, Zeus left her as a cruel mockery, a false promise in a world of suffering. Epimetheus, seeing the catastrophe, realized his mistake, but could change nothing. Pandora, full of remorse, became a symbol of feminine curiosity that brought the end of innocence to the world. This myth of Pandora has deep roots in Greek culture. It explains the origin of women as a tribe that brings evil, according to the patriarchal views of the ancients, and why life is full of difficulties. In Roman mythology, Pandora evolved, and her box became a metaphor for unforeseen consequences. Philosophers like Nietzsche saw hope as the worst of all evils because it prolongs torment. In art, from the paintings of Titian to the literature of Mary Shelley, Pandora embodies the theme of forbidden knowledge. The labors of Heracles. The labors of Heracles, the trials of the son of Zeus. In the pantheon of ancient Greek legends, where heroes battle monsters and fate, rises the figure of Heracles, the demigod whose strength became synonymous with indomitable might, and whose feats were the benchmark of heroism.
This myth, detailed in the works of Apollodorus, Diodorus Siculus, and in vase painting, recounts the 12 unthinkable trials that Heracles endured to atone for guilt and achieve immortality. Heracles was no ordinary mortal. Born from the union of the supreme god and an earthly woman, he displayed superhuman strength from childhood. But his life was overshadowed by the jealousy of the goddess of marriage and the intrigues of fate. These labors are not just adventures, but an allegory of human effort, the fight against inner demons, the overcoming of obstacles, and the search for purification. Let us walk through this epic saga, step by step, to feel how one hero changed the map of the mythical world. Heracles was born in Thebes to Alcmene, wife of King Amphitryon. His real father was Zeus, who, disguised as her husband, spent a night with Alcmene that was stretched to 3 times its normal length. From birth, Heracles showed his strength. When the jealous Hera, Zeus's wife, sent 2 snakes into the cradle to kill the infant, he strangled them with his bare hands. In his youth, Heracles was trained by the best, in archery, wrestling, and music. He grew into a mighty warrior, but tragedy struck him in adulthood. In a fit of madness sent by Hera, Heracles furiously killed his wife Megara and his children. Waking up, he was crushed by grief and turned to the oracle of Delphi for advice. The Pythia proclaimed that to atone for his guilt, he must serve King Eurystheus of Tiryns for 12 years and perform the 12 labors he would assign. Only then would he gain forgiveness and immortality. Eurystheus, the cowardly and envious cousin of Heracles, ruled in Mycenae under Hera's patronage. He assigned tasks that seemed impossible, hoping to destroy the hero. Heracles, armed with a club made of olive wood, a bow and arrows, later wearing the skin of a lion, and with the help of his nephew Iolaus, set off on his journey. The first labor, to kill the Nemean lion. This was a monster with an impenetrable hide that terrorized the vicinity of Nemesa. Heracles' arrows bounced off its skin, so the hero cornered the lion in a cave, strangled it with his bare hands, and skinned it with the beast's own claw. The lion hide became his cloak, a symbol of invulnerability. Eurystheus, seeing the trophy, hid in fear in a bronze pithos, and henceforth gave orders through a herald. The second labor brought Heracles to Lerna, where the Hydra lived, a multi-headed snake with poisonous breath, born of Typhon and Echidna. Each severed head grew back double, but Heracles, with the help of Iolaus, who cauterized the necks with a torch, defeated it. The last immortal head he crushed with a stone and buried. The Hydra's blood became the poison for the hero's arrows. The third labor, to capture the Ceryneian hind, a sacred animal of Artemis with golden horns and bronze hooves, the fastest in the world. Heracles pursued it for a year through forests and mountains, finally wounding it in the leg with an arrow and capturing it alive. Artemis forgave him, and the hind was delivered to Eurystheus. The fourth labor, to seize the Erymanthian boar, a giant pig that spread terror in Arcadia. Heracles drove it into the snow on Mount Erymanthus, caught it in a net, and brought it back alive on his shoulders. On the way, he visited the centaur Pholus, where a skirmish with other centaurs occurred, ending in the death of many from poisoned arrows. The fifth labor became a test of cunning, to cleanse the Augean stables. King Augeas of Elis had thousands of cows whose stalls had not been cleaned for 30 years. Heracles, instead of a shovel, dug channels from the rivers Alpheus and Peneus, redirecting the water through the stables, washing away the filth in a day. Augeas refused to pay the promised amount, but the labor was counted. The sixth labor to eradicate the Stymphalian birds by Lake Stymphalus in Arcadia. These bronze-winged predators with copper beaks and claws, born of heirs, devoured people. Athena gave Heracles a rattle from Hephaestus. He scared the flock away with the noise and then shot them down with his bow. The seventh labor, to tame the Cretan bull.
This snow-white beast sent by Poseidon to Minos sowed chaos on Crete. Heracles sailed across the sea, mounted the bull, and brought it to Mycenae, where Eurystheus released it. The eighth labor took Heracles to Thrace to capture the mares of King Diomedes, flesh-eating horses fed human meat. Heracles overpowered the guards, fed Diomedes himself to them, tamed the horses, and delivered them to Eurystheus. The ninth labor, to obtain the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. This girdle, a gift from Ares, symbolized power. Hippolyta initially agreed to give it, but Hera, disguised as an Amazon, sowed discord, provoking a battle. Heracles struck down Hippolyta, took the girdle, and returned, saving Hesiod from a sea monster along the way. The 10th labor, to steal the cattle of Geryon from the island of Erythea at the edge of the world. Geryon was a three-bodied giant with a dog, Orthrus. Heracles, having crossed the ocean in Helios's golden cup, killed Orthrus, the herdsman, and Geryon himself with arrows poisoned by the Hydra's blood. He drove the herd through the Alps, fighting robbers, and delivered them to Eurystheus. The 11th labor, to pluck the golden apples of the Hesperides from the garden at the edge of the world, guarded by the dragon Ladon and the daughters of Atlas. Heracles persuaded Atlas, the holder of the sky, to pick the apples, temporarily taking the burden onto himself. Atlas tried to deceive him, but Heracles cleverly tricked him into taking the sky back and carried off the fruit. The 12th and most dangerous labor, to bring Cerberus out of Hades. The three-headed dog with a serpentine tail guarded the gates of the underworld. Heracles descended through a cave in Taenarum, fought demons, persuaded Hades and Persephone, grabbed Cerberus with his bare hands, and brought him into the light. Eurystheus, in terror, returned the dog immediately. Having completed the labors, Heracles gained his freedom, but his life continued. He participated in the expedition of the Argonauts and fought the giants. He married Deianira. A tragic end came from the poisoned shirt of Nessus. In agony, Heracles ascended the pyre on Mount Oeta, where Zeus raised him to Olympus as a god. The labors of Heracles are a map of the ancient world, from the Peloponnese to the Atlantic, symbolizing the conquest of chaos by civilization. They inspired art, from the vases of Herculaneum to Hollywood films, and philosophy, Heracles as the Stoic overcoming fate. In the Roman version, he became Hercules, the patron of strength. Perseus and the head of Medusa, the hero who conquered the terror of the gaze. In the treasury of ancient Greek myths, where fates intertwine with the will of the gods and monsters born of ancient curses, shines the legend of Perseus, the demigod whose courage and cunning allowed him to defeat one of the most terrifying creatures of the universe. This myth, detailed in Ovid's Metamorphoses, the library of Apollodorus, and on numerous Attic ceramic vases, tells of the quest for the head of the Gorgon Medusa, whose gaze turned any living being to stone. Perseus was not a warrior seeking glory in battle. He was a youth forced to prove his worth to protect his mother from a tyrant. His story is a hymn to wit over brute force, the aid of divine patrons, and the inevitability of fate, where even monsters have their tragic backstory. Let us immerse ourselves in this epic full of mysteries, journeys, and transformations to see how one hero changed the course of many lives. It all began on the island of Seriphus, where fate had cast Danae, the daughter of the Argive king Acrisius. The oracle predicted Acrisius's death at the hands of his grandson, and in fear, he imprisoned her daughter in a bronze tower. But the love of the gods knows no bounds. The supreme god appeared to Danae in the form of a golden shower, and from this union, Perseus was born. Acrisius, learning of the child, dared not kill them directly, fearing the wrath of the gods, and locked the mother and son in a wooden chest, casting it into the sea. The waves carried them to Seriphos, where the fisherman Dictys rescued them and sheltered them.
Dictys' brother, King Polydectes, fell in love with Dinar, but she rejected him. To get rid of Perseus, who had become his mother's protector, Polydectes held a feast where guests were required to bring gifts for his wedding to Hippodamia. Perseus, a poor youth, boasted that he would bring the head of a Gorgon, and Polydectes seized on the words, "Go and retrieve Medusa's head, or your mother will become my slave." The Gorgons were three sisters, Steno, Uriel, and Medusa, daughters of the sea deities Phorcys and Ceto. Medusa was once a beautiful maiden with golden hair, a servant in Athena's temple. But the sea god Poseidon seduced her in the sanctuary, and the enraged Athena turned Medusa into a monster. Her hair became snakes, her body was covered in scales. Tusks grew like a boar's, and her gaze turned everything living to stone. Steno and Uriel were immortal, but Medusa was mortal. They lived at the edge of the world, by the ocean in a gloomy cave surrounded by statues of their petrified victims. Perseus, having no weapon or plan, turned to the gods for help. Athena, the patroness of heroes, and Hermes, the messenger, appeared to him. Athena gave him a polished bronze shield to look at the reflection without meeting Medusa's gaze. Hermes presented him with an adamantine sickle, a curved sword capable of cutting stone. But to find the Gorgons, Perseus needed more artifacts: winged sandals for flight, Hades' helmet of invisibility, and the magical pouch, Kibesis, which stretched to hold any load. These items were kept by the Graeae, three old sisters of the Gorgons who shared one eye and one tooth among them, living in a cave near Atlas. Perseus crept up to the Graeae and snatched their eye as they passed it from one to another. "Return the eye or tell me where the artifacts are," he demanded. The old women, blinded, surrendered and showed the way to the nymphs, the keepers of the treasures. The nymphs gave Perseus the sandals, the helmet, and the pouch. Putting on the sandals, Perseus flew over the ocean, guided by Hermes to the Gorgons' island. There, in the gloom, he saw the sleeping sisters. Athena prompted, "Do not look directly." Perseus, in the helmet of invisibility, crept closer, looking into the shield as if into a mirror. With one swing of the sickle, he cut off Medusa's head. Blood gushed from her neck, and the winged horse Pegasus and the giant Chrysaor with the golden sword were born, children of the sea god. Steno and Uriel woke up and rushed in pursuit, but the helmet made Perseus invisible, and he flew away. With Medusa's head in the pouch, Perseus headed home, but the journey was full of adventures. In Ethiopia, he saw Andromeda chained to a rock as a sacrifice to the sea monster Cetus, sent by Poseidon for the boasting of her mother, Cassiopeia. Perseus fell in love with the princess and offered to save her in exchange for her hand and heart. King Cepheus agreed. Perseus brought out Medusa's head, turning the sea monster into stone, and freed Andromeda. At the wedding, Andromeda's uncle Phineus attacked, claiming the bride, but Perseus showed the head, petrifying the entire feast hall except for his allies. Returning to Seriphos,
Perseus found his mother in the temple, hiding from Polydectes. At the king's feast, he presented his gift, Medusa's head. Polydectes and his entourage turned to stone, becoming statues. Perseus returned the throne to Dictys and the artifacts to the gods. Then he, Andromeda, and Dinar returned to Argos. Acrisius, hearing about his grandson, fled to Larissa, but fate caught up. During games, Perseus accidentally hurled a discus, killing his grandfather. Refusing the throne of Argos in guilt, Perseus founded Mycenae, where he ruled with Andromeda, and had sons, including Perses, the ancestor of the Persians, and Electryon, the grandfather of another great hero. The head of Medusa did not disappear. Perseus gave it to Athena, and the goddess placed the image on the aegis, her shield, which repelled enemies.
The myth explains the origin of corals. Medusa's blood falling into the sea turned the seaweed into stone, and the constellations Perseus, Andromeda, Cassiopeia, and Cepheus in the sky. In art, Perseus is depicted with the sickle and the head, from Cellini's sculptures to Rubens' paintings. This legend teaches that true strength lies in wisdom and assistance, not brute force, and that even monsters were once victims. The Argonauts and the search for the Golden Fleece. The journey of heroes for the marvelous hide. In the whirlwind of ancient Greek legends, where the seas hide monsters and gods intervene in mortal affairs, unfolds the epic of the Argonauts, a brave crew of heroes who embarked on a dangerous voyage for the Golden Fleece. This myth, immortalized in the poem Argonautica by Apollonius of Rhodes, and mentioned in the works of Pindar and Euripides, tells of a quest full of trials, love, and betrayal. The Golden Fleece, the hide of a mythical ram with wool of pure gold, symbolized power, prosperity, and divine blessing. It hung on an oak in distant Colchis, guarded by a sleepless dragon. The story of the Argonauts is not only an adventure, but also an allegory of unity, where heroes from different lands unite under the leadership of Jason to challenge fate and the seas. Let us embark on this journey, full of storms, magic, and triumphs, to understand how the thirst for a throne led to one of the greatest expeditions of antiquity. It all began in Iolcus, a Thessalian kingdom ruled by the usurper Peleus. The rightful king was Aeson, but his half-brother Peleus seized the throne, exiling Aeson and his son Jason. Jason, raised by the centaur Chiron in the mountains, grew up a strong and wise youth, trained in hunting, medicine, and art. When he returned to Iolcus to claim the throne, Peleus, frightened by an oracle who foretold death at the hands of a man with one sandal, Jason had lost one on the way, cunningly promised, "Return the Golden Fleece from Colchis, and the throne is yours." The Golden Fleece came from a ram sent by Hermes to save the children Phrixus and Helle from their evil stepmother. The ram carried them across the sea, but Helle fell, hence the Hellespont. Phrixus reached Colchis, where King Aeetes sacrificed the ram and hung the fleece in the sacred grove of Ares. Jason accepted the challenge and began assembling a crew. A call was sent throughout Greece. Heroes were needed for the great voyage. The best responded. Orpheus, the singer whose songs tamed beasts in waves, the twins Castor and Pollux, sons of Leda, masters of boxing and horsemanship, Telamon, father of Ajax, and Peleus, father of Achilles, Atalanta, the warrior, the only woman in the crew, Ancaeus, the helmsman, Typhus, the steersman, and many others, about 50 in total. Among them was the mighty hero Heracles, but he left the expedition early after the loss of a friend on a mission. The ship, named Argo in honor of its builder Argus, was constructed from the sacred oaks of Dodona under the patronage of Athena. It had 50 oars, a mast, and even a talking prow made of oak, uttering prophecies. The Argonauts sailed from Pagasae, making sacrifices to Apollo and Poseidon. The first trial awaited them on the island of Limnos, where the women, angered by Aphrodite, had killed all the men. Queen Hypsipyle seduced Jason, and the heroes lingered, enjoying the hospitality. Only a reminder of their goal forced them to continue their journey. Next, they reached the shores of Thrace, where they met the blind king Phineus, tormented by the Harpies, winged monsters who stole his food. The sons of Boris, Zetes and Calais, drove the Harpies away with the winds, and in gratitude, Phineus revealed the secrets of the path, how to pass the Symplegades, the clashing rocks at the entrance to the Bosphorus. On his advice, the Argonauts released a dove. The rocks clashed, clipping the tail, but then reopened, allowing the Argo to slip through. The voyage across the Black Sea was full of dangers. They bypassed the lands of the Amazons, the island of Eridius, where birds shot feathers like arrows, and reached Colchis by the Phasis River.
King Aeetes, son of Helios, met them hostilely but invited them to a feast. He agreed to give up the fleece if Jason performed 3 tasks: yoke the fire-breathing bulls with brazen hooves, plow the field of Ares, sow it with dragon's teeth from which warriors would sprout, and defeat them. Jason despaired, but Medea, Aeetes' daughter, a sorceress trained by Hecate, came to his aid, having fallen in love with Jason by the will of Aphrodite and Eros. She gave him an ointment that made him invulnerable to fire and iron, and taught him tricks. At dawn, Jason smeared himself with the ointment, yoked the bulls, plowed the field, and sowed the teeth. Armed warriors, Spartoi, grew out of the earth, but Medea suggested throwing a stone into the crowd. They fought each other and perished. Aeetes, enraged, refused to keep his word, planning to burn the Argo. Medea helped again, putting the dragon to sleep with a potion of herbs, and Jason plucked the fleece from the oak. The Argonauts fled that night, taking Medea and her brother Absyrtus. Aeetes pursued them with his fleet. To delay him, Medea killed Absyrtus, scattering his body parts into the sea. Aeetes stopped to gather the body. This act of betrayal became a curse for Medea. The return was no less dangerous. They sailed past Scylla and Charybdis, but Orpheus drowned out the sirens with his lyre, allowing the crew to bypass them. On the island of Phaeacia, King Alcinous gave them refuge, but demanded proof of Jason and Medea's marriage. They married in a cave, bypassed Libya, where the Argo was carried on their shoulders for 12 days through the desert, according to a prophecy, and the island of Crete, where Medea blinded the bronze guardian Talos by spilling his ichor. The Argonauts returned to Iolcus. Peleus refused to surrender the throne. Medea, taking revenge, convinced Peleus's daughters to rejuvenate their father by boiling him in a cauldron with herbs. They killed Peleus, but Medea did not bring him back to life. For this, Jason and Medea were exiled. They settled in Corinth, where Jason betrayed Medea, marrying the princess Glaus. In her fury, Medea poisoned the bride and killed her own children by Jason, flying away on the chariot of Helios. Jason, broken, died under the wreckage of the Argo, which had become a sanctuary. The myth of the Argonauts is a hymn to adventure and unity. It explains the names of seas, islands, and constellations. The Argo became a ship in the sky. Its influence is seen in the Odyssey and Roman epics. The Argonauts inspired art, from vase paintings to Handel's operas. Theseus and the Minotaur, the hero who solved the labyrinth of terror. At the heart of ancient Greek mythology, where heroes battle not only monsters, but also the intricate complexity of fate, lies the legend of Theseus, Prince of Athens, whose courage and intellect allowed him to defeat one of the most enigmatic and terrifying creations of the ancient world. This myth, preserved in the works of Plutarch, Ovid, and on Minoan palace frescoes, tells of the journey into the labyrinth, where lurked the hybrid creature, a symbol of chaos and the revenge of the gods. The Minotaur, half bull and half man, was not just a monster, but the result of a curse inflicted on the Cretan king Minos. The story of Theseus is a narrative of growing up, love, betrayal, and the triumph of reason over brute force, where Ariadne's thread becomes a metaphor for the guiding star in the darkness. Let us analyze this saga step by step to feel the breath of Crete and the echo of the Athenian walls. Theseus was born in Troezen to Aegeus, king of Athens, and Aethra, daughter of the local ruler Pythias. According to one version, his father was the sea god Poseidon himself, who appeared to Aethra, endowing Theseus with divine strength. Aegeus, fearing for his son due to political intrigues, his nephews, the Palantides, claimed the throne, left a sword and sandals under a huge rock as a sign of recognition. "When the boy can move the stone, let him come to Athens," he said.
Theseus grew up to be a strong and brave youth. At 16, he easily lifted the boulder, took the relics, and set off on a path full of dangers to prove his origin. Along the way, he cleansed the isthmus of bandits, defeated Periphas with his iron club, Cenas the robber who tore his victims apart between trees, Procrustes who tailored travelers to the size of his bed, and others. These feats made him known as a defender of justice, like the great heroes of the past. Arriving in Athens, Theseus did not immediately reveal himself. Aegeus, stupefied by the charms of Medea, the sorceress who had fled from Corinth, nearly poisoned his son at a feast. But recognizing the sword, Aegeus embraced Theseus and proclaimed him heir. The Palantides rebelled, but Theseus suppressed the revolt, strengthening his father's power. However, Athens was in trouble. The city paid tribute to Crete. 7 youths and 7 maidens were annually sent to be devoured by the Minotaur. This tribute was imposed by Minos, king of Crete, after the death of his son Androgeus in Athens, according to one version, killed out of jealousy for his victories at the games. Minos, son of Europa and the supreme god in the form of a bull, called upon the sea god for help. Poseidon inflicted a plague on Athens, and the oracle demanded the tribute. The Minotaur was born from a curse imposed by the same sea god upon Minos. The king promised to sacrifice a beautiful white bull that emerged from the waves, but greed took over. He hid the animal in his herd. In retaliation, Poseidon inspired Pasiphae, Minos' wife, with an unnatural passion for the bull. She turned to Daedalus, the Athenian inventor who had fled to Crete after murdering his nephew. Daedalus crafted a wooden cow in which Pasiphae hid, and from this union, the Minotaur, Asterius, was born, with the head and tail of a bull on a human body. Minos, horrified, ordered Daedalus to build the labyrinth, a tangled palace in Knossos with countless corridors from which no one could find the exit. The Minotaur was imprisoned there, fed on human sacrifices. When the time came for the third tribute, Theseus volunteered among the 14 Athenian youths and maidens. "I will kill the monster and free Athens," he declared to his father. Aegeus gave the ship black sails as a sign of mourning, but instructed him to change them to white in case of success. The ship sailed to Crete, where Minos met the captives. The king noticed the beauty of one maiden and desired her, but Theseus intervened. "I am the son of the sea god, just like you." Minos threw a ring into the sea. "Prove it, retrieve it." Theseus dived, and dolphins or nymphs returned the ring along with Amphitrite's wreath. This impressed Minos, but did not stop the tribute. In Crete, Theseus met Ariadne, Minos' daughter, who fell in love with him at first sight by the will of the goddess of love. At night, she came to him with advice. "Take a thread to find your way back." Ariadne received the ball of thread from Daedalus and gave it to Theseus, instructing him to tie one end at the entrance to the labyrinth. She also gave him a sword or a crown that glowed in the dark. At dawn, the Athenians were led into the labyrinth. Theseus went first, unwinding the thread. In the depths, the monster charged, but Theseus, agile and strong, dodged its horns and destroyed it with his fists or sword. Following the thread, he led his companions out.
Ariadne fled with Theseus, dreaming of marriage in Athens. They set sail. But on the Isle of Naxos, Theseus abandoned her in his sleep. According to one version, by command of the gods, according to another, out of forgetfulness or betrayal. Ariadne awoke in despair, but the god of wine, Dionysus, fell in love and made her his wife, giving her a crown that became a constellation. Theseus, grieving or not, continued his journey, but forgot to change the sails. Aegeus, seeing the black canvases from the cliff, threw himself into the sea, which has since been called the Aegean Sea. Theseus became king of Athens, introduced democracy, united Attica, and founded the Isthmian Games.
But Theseus's life did not end in triumph. He married Phaedra, Ariadne's sister, but she fell in love with his stepson, Hippolytus, which led to tragedy. Phaedra slandered Hippolytus. Theseus cursed his son. Poseidon sent a bowl from the waves that killed the youth. Later, Theseus participated in expeditions, including the abduction of Helen and the descent into Hades for Persephone with Pirithous, where he became trapped on the throne of forgetfulness until another hero rescued him. In the end, Theseus was overthrown and died, falling from a cliff on Skyros. The Athenians revered him as the founder of the city, and his bones were returned as a relic. The myth of Theseus and the Minotaur is a symbol of overcoming the inner labyrinth of fears and instincts. It explains place names like the Aegean Sea and rituals like the games in honor of the gods. In art, from Minoan frescoes to Picasso's paintings, Theseus embodies the Athenian hero, contrasted with barbarism. This story influenced literature, from Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream to the labyrinths of Borges. Achilles and the Trojan War, the wrath of the greatest warrior. In the epic canvas of ancient Greek mythology, where the fates of nations are decided on battlefields and in the halls of the gods, rises the figure of Achilles, the demigod whose fury and glory became the heart of the Trojan War. This myth, immortalized in Homer's Iliad and supplemented in the Cypria and Aethiopus of the epic cycle, tells of the 10-year siege of Troy, where love, honor, and revenge intertwined into a bloody knot. Achilles was not a simple soldier. He was the son of a mortal king and a sea nymph, endowed with invulnerability, but destined for a short, brilliant life. The war erupted due to the abduction of the beautiful Helen, but Achilles transformed it into a personal drama of wrath, loss, and heroism. This is a story of how one warrior could overturn the course of battle, but also of the fragility of human destiny before the will of the Moirai. Let us dive into this whirlwind of events, from prophecies to the fall of heroes, to understand why the name Achilles echoes through the ages. Achilles was born in Phthia, the kingdom of Peleus, from a union with Thetis, one of the Nereids, daughters of the sea elder Nereus. Thetis knew the prophecy. Her son would either live a long, quiet life or die young, but in eternal glory. To protect the child, she dipped him in the waters of the Styx, the river of the underworld, which made him invulnerable. Holding him by the heel, she did not notice that this part of the body remained vulnerable, hence the Achilles heel. According to another version, Thetis hardened her son in fire, but Peleus interrupted the ritual and she angrily left her husband, returning to the sea depths. Achilles grew up under the tutelage of the centaur Chiron on Mount Pelion, where he learned hunting, medicine, and military art. He became fast as the wind, strong as a lion, and skilled with the spear. Meanwhile, a catastrophe was brewing in the mortal world. At the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, where the gods feasted, Eris, the goddess of discord, threw a golden apple inscribed, "For the fairest." Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite quarreled over it. Zeus entrusted the judgment to Paris, the Trojan prince grazing sheep on Mount Ida. Each goddess tempted him. Hera with power, Athena with wisdom and victory in wars, and Aphrodite with the love of the most beautiful woman, Helen, wife of the Spartan king Menelaus. Paris chose Aphrodite, and she helped him abduct Helen during a visit to Sparta. This offense to hospitality, Xenia, ignited the wrath of the Greeks. Menelaus and his brother Agamemnon, king of Mycena, assembled a huge army.
Odysseus of Ithaca, Ajax the Great of Salamis, Nestor of Pylos, Diomedes of Argos, and many others. They had sworn on the blood of a horse to defend Helen's honor, an oath taken by her suitors in youth. But Achilles was not eager for war. Thetis, knowing the prophecy, hid her son on the island of Skyros at the court of King Lycomedes, disguising him in women's clothing among the princesses. Odysseus, the cunning king, exposed him by bringing gifts of jewelry and weaponry.
When the war horn sounded, Achilles snatched the sword, giving himself away. He joined the fleet in Aulis, where the Greeks waited for the wind. To appease Artemis, enraged at Agamemnon for killing a hind, the king sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia. According to some versions, the goddess saved her, replacing her with a deer. The wind blew, and 1,000 ships sailed to Troy. The Trojan War lasted 10 years. Troy, fortified by walls built by Apollo and Poseidon, stood under the protection of King Priam, his sons Hector, the greatest Trojan, and Paris, as well as allies like Sarpedon from Lycia and Penthesilea, queen of the Amazons. The Greeks landed on the shore, ravaged the surrounding area, but could not take the city. Achilles shone in the battles. He captured 12 cities, killed Cycnus, son of Poseidon, who was invulnerable to weapons. Achilles strangled him with his helmet strap, and Tenes, son of Apollo. His prize was Briseis, a beautiful captive from Lyrnessus. In the 9th year of the war, the wrath of Achilles, the central theme of the Iliad, flared up. Agamemnon seized Chryseis, daughter of a priest of Apollo, and refused to return her despite the plague sent by the god. When he finally conceded, he took Briseis from Achilles as compensation. "You are a drunkard with the eyes of a dog and the heart of a deer," Achilles roared in fury, accusing Agamemnon of greed. Offended, he refused to fight, retreating to his tent with the Myrmidons, his warriors. Thetis begged Zeus to give the Trojans the advantage so that the Greeks would realize their loss. The Trojans, led by Hector, broke through the Greek camp and set the ships on fire. Achilles did not budge, but allowed his friend Patroclus to wear his armor and lead the Myrmidons into battle. Patroclus drove back the Trojans, killed Sarpedon, but fell at the hands of Hector, who was aided by Apollo. Learning of the death of his friend, and according to some interpretations, lover, Achilles howled with grief. Thetis brought him new armor from Hephaestus, a shield depicting the world, a helmet with a golden crest. Achilles reconciled with Agamemnon, who returned Briseis and rushed into battle. He slaughtered the Trojans, filling the Scamander River with bodies, even fighting the river god himself until Zeus intervened. Finally, Achilles met Hector at the Scaean gates. Hector fled 3 times around Troy, but Athena tricked him, taking the form of his brother Deiphobus. Achilles pierced Hector's neck with his spear, tied the body to his chariot, and dragged it across the field, avenging Patroclus. Priam, guided by Hermes, came to Achilles' tent at night, begging for the return of his son's body. Moved, Achilles agreed, and the funeral games were held. But Achilles' glory was short-lived. After Patroclus' funeral, he struck down Penthesilea, falling in love with the dying Amazon, and Memnon, the Ethiopian king, son of Eos. Finally, Paris, guided by Apollo, shot an arrow into the only vulnerable spot, Achilles' heel. The hero fell, and the Greeks fought for his body. Ajax the Great carried it, but later went mad from a dispute over the armor and committed suicide. The war continued. Odysseus captured the seer Helenus, learning that Troy would fall after the theft of the Palladium and the use of Heracles' arrows. Philoctetes, bitten by a snake and left on Lemnos, returned with the bow. Paris died from his arrows. Finally, Odysseus conceived the Trojan horse. The Greeks hid inside the wooden horse, allegedly a gift to Poseidon, and the fleet sailed away. The Trojans dragged the horse into the city, and at night the Greeks emerged, opening the gates. Troy fell in flames. Priam was killed at the altar. Andromache, Hector's widow, was taken captive, and Astyanax was thrown from the walls. Helen returned to Menelaus, but the price was immense. Many heroes perished. The Trojan War and Achilles became symbols of the heroic age. The myth explains the fall of civilizations, the migration of peoples. The Trojans, led by Aeneas, founded Rome, and eternal themes: honor versus revenge, love versus duty.
In art, from vase paintings to Brad Pitt's Troy, Achilles embodies the ideal warrior whose wrath destroys yet also elevates. Odysseus and his wanderings. Odysseus and his wanderings, the long way home. In the labyrinths of ancient Greek mythology, where cunning often triumphs over strength and gods play chess with mortal fates, flourishes the epic of Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, whose name became synonymous with guile and survival. This myth, masterfully recounted in Homer's poem The Odyssey and supplemented in later sources like Virgil and Apollodorus, tells of the hero's 10 years of wandering after the Great War, where he fought for another's honor. Odysseus was not an invincible warrior or a treasure seeker. He was a master of deceit, a father and a husband striving to return home to his wife Penelope and son Telemachus. His journey is a chain of trials, full of monsters, spells, and storms, symbolizing humanity's struggle with nature, the gods, and themselves. This is a story of patience, fidelity, and the price of glory, where every island holds a lesson. Let us trace this path, full of dangers and discoveries, to understand how one man tricked even fate. After the fall of the impregnable city, Odysseus, gathering a fleet of 12 ships, sailed from the walls of Ilion, dreaming of a swift return to Ithaca. But the wrath of the sea god, caused by one of his actions, condemned the hero to years of wandering. The first trial was the coast of the Cyclades, where Odysseus's warriors plundered the city of Ismarus, but lost many comrades in the counter-raid. Barely escaping the pursuit, the fleet landed in the land of the Lotus Eaters, a people who ate lotuses that made them forget their homeland. Odysseus forcibly dragged his men who had tasted the fruit back onto the ships, reminding them of home. Next, a storm cast them onto the island of the Cyclopes, one-eyed giant cannibals, sons of the sea god. In the cave of Polyphemus, the giant shepherd, Odysseus and 12 companions were trapped. The Cyclops blocked the entrance with a stone and devoured 6 of them. The cunning hero plied Polyphemus with wine, calling himself Nobody. When the giant slept, Odysseus and his comrades blinded him with the heated stake. At Polyphemus's cries, other Cyclopses ran up. "Who hurt you?" "Nobody," he roared, and they left. In the morning, Odysseus tied his men under the sheep to escape when Polyphemus let the flock out. From the ship, Odysseus shouted his true name, and the blinded Cyclops cursed him, calling upon his father, the sea god, for revenge. Thus began the real troubles. Storms and waves became eternal companions. Escaping a storm, the ships reached the floating island of Aeolus, lord of the winds. Aeolus, a friend of the gods, gave Odysseus a bag containing the winds, leaving only a gentle zephyr for the journey home. But when Ithaca was already in sight, curious sailors untied the bag thinking it held treasure. The winds burst out, carrying the fleet back to Aeolus, who refused to help, seeing the curse of the gods. Next, they landed among the Lystrygonians, giant cannibals in Telepolis. They hurled rocks at the ships, sinking 11. Only Odysseus's vessel escaped with a handful of men. The most mysterious adventure was the island of Aea, home of the sorceress Circe, daughter of Helios and an Oceanid. She turned Odysseus's companions into pigs with a potion of milk and cheese. The hero, warned by Hermes and protected by the moly herb, withstood the charms and forced Circe to restore his men's form with his sword. Circe fell in love with Odysseus, and they lived in luxury for a year. But homesickness brought them back to the journey. On Circe's advice, Odysseus descended into Hades through a cave at the edge of the ocean to ask the prophet Tiresias about the future. In the underworld, he met the shades of the dead, his mother Anticlea, Agamemnon, murdered by his wife, and Ajax, sullen over the armor dispute. Tiresias warned, "Avoid the cattle of Helios, or you will perish. Suitors await you at home, but you will overcome them." Returning, the fleet bypassed the island of the Sirens, creatures with bird bodies and female voices, whose songs lure sailors onto the rocks.
Odysseus plugged his companions' ears with wax, but tied himself to the mast to hear the singing without jumping overboard. The sirens promised knowledge of everything, but the hero endured. Next awaited Scylla and Charybdis, monsters in the strait. Charybdis, daughter of Gaia and Poseidon, sucked in water 3 times a day, sinking ships. Scylla, a 6-headed creature in a cave, snatched sailors. Odysseus chose the lesser evil, losing 6 men to Scylla but bypassing Charybdis. On the island of Thrinacia grazed the sacred cattle of Helios. Despite the warning, the hungry sailors slaughtered the cows while Odysseus slept. Helios, in a rage, begged Zeus to punish them. Lightning shattered the ship. Odysseus alone survived on a piece of wreckage, drifting to Charybdis, where he hung from a fig tree until she spat out the mast. For 10 days, he drifted across the sea until he reached Ogygia, the island of the nymph Calypso, daughter of Atlas. Calypso fell in love and held Odysseus for 7 years, promising immortality, but he longed for home. Finally, at Zeus's command, Hermes forced her to release the hero. Odysseus built a raft and sailed away, but the sea god sent a storm. He was saved by Ino, a sea goddess with her veil. Washed ashore on Scheria, the land of the Phaeacians, skilled seafarers under King Antinous, Odysseus met Princess Nausicaa, playing ball. She led him to the palace, where at a feast he revealed his name, recounting his wanderings. The Phaeacians, moved, gave him a ship and treasures, delivering the sleeping Odysseus to Ithaca. Waking up, he did not recognize his homeland. Athena had hidden it with mist. Meeting the swineherd Eumaeus, Odysseus, disguised as a beggar, learned of the trouble. 108 suitors besieged Penelope, devastating the house, confident in her husband's death. Telemachus, Odysseus's son, returned from searching for his father. He had traveled to Pylos of Sparta, to Nestor and Menelaus, and Athena brought them together. In the palace, Odysseus endured the taunts of the suitors. Penelope announced, "I will marry the one who strings Odysseus's bow and shoots an arrow through 12 axe heads." No one could, except the beggar. Throwing off his rags, Odysseus, with Telemachus and loyal servants, slaughtered the suitors with arrows and swords. Euryclea, the nurse, recognized the hero by a scar from a boar. Penelope tested her husband, ordering the bed to be moved, but Odysseus knew the secret. It was carved from an olive tree rooted in the ground. Thus, they reunited. The relatives of the suitors revolted, but Athena pacified them, establishing peace. Odysseus's journey is an allegory of the path of life, from war to home, through temptation. The myth explains place names such as Scylla and Charybdis in the Strait of Messina, and rituals of hospitality. In culture, it inspired Joyce's Ulysses, films, and the metaphor of the Odyssey as a long journey. Orpheus and Eurydice, the song of love that conquered death. In the melodious currents of ancient Greek mythology, where music intertwines with fate and love challenges the very boundaries of life and death, rings the tragic ballad of Orpheus and Eurydice. This myth, inspired by Virgil's poems in the Georgics, Ovid's Metamorphoses, and echoes in the Orphic hymns, tells of the power of art that can tame nature and gods, but is not always able to outwit human weakness. Orpheus was not a warrior with a sword, but a poet with a lyre, whose songs caused rivers to stop, trees to bend, and beasts to forget their enmity. His story with Eurydice is a hymn to eternal love, loss, and the hope for reunification beyond the veil, where even the underworld melts from harmony. This narrative teaches that true beauty lies in passion, but one moment of doubt can destroy everything. Let us dive into this melody of sorrow and ecstasy, step by step, to hear the echo of that ancient lyre. Orpheus was born in Thrace, the wild land of northern Greece, from the union of Apollo, god of light and music, with Calliope, the eldest of the 9 muses, the patroness of epic poetry.
From childhood, Orpheus possessed a gift transcending the human. His voice and playing of the lyre, gifted by his father, captivated all living things. Stones rolled to his feet, birds flocked to listen, and wild beasts lay down at his feet, forgetting their hunger. He became a wandering singer whose hymns glorified the gods, nature, and love. Orpheus participated in great adventures, but his heart sought quiet harmony, and he found it in Eurydice, a beautiful dryad nymph whose grace resembled the rustling of leaves and whose eyes shone like morning dew. Their love ignited instantly. Orpheus sang for her, and the forests echoed his melodies, and Eurydice danced like the wind in the treetops. The wedding of Orpheus and Eurydice was a celebration of harmony. Nymphs and satyrs gathered in the grove, where flowers blossomed at the sound of the lyre. But the joy was short-lived. Soon after the ceremony, Eurydice, walking with her friends, stepped on a snake, a venomous viper hidden in the grass. The bite was fatal. Eurydice collapsed, and her soul was carried away to the underworld. Orpheus, seeing the lifeless body of his beloved, fell into despair. His songs turned into weeping, which caused trees to wither and rivers to overflow their banks. "Without Eurydice, the world is an empty melody," he moaned. But Orpheus's love was stronger than death. He decided to descend into Hades to beg the rulers of the underworld for the return of his wife. If music contained beasts, why not the gods of death, he thought. With his lyre in hand, Orpheus headed to Tenerium, the cave on Cape Tenerinon, leading to the netherworld. He passed the gloomy gates, where the 3-headed dog guarded the entrance. But at the sound of the lyre, Cerberus lay down, wagging his tails, and allowed him to pass. Charon, the sullen ferryman of souls across the Styx, initially refused to carry a living man, but Orpheus's melody softened his heart, and he ferried the hero across for free. In the realm of shadows, Orpheus walked past the suffering souls, Sisyphus rolling his stone, Tantalus tormented by hunger near the fruits, and Ixion on the wheel. His songs made them forget their torments. Even the Erinyes, the goddesses of vengeance, wept upon hearing the harmony. Finally, Orpheus stood before the throne of Hades, the gloomy lord of the dead, and his consort Persephone, once abducted from the world of the living. "Great king," Orpheus sang, accompanying himself on the lyre, "I am neither a thief nor a conqueror. I have come for my Eurydice, whose life was cut short too soon. My love is like an eternal melody that cannot be silenced. Return her, and I will glorify your mercy in songs above." His voice was so penetrating that Hades, usually relentless, felt pity.
Persephone, remembering her own separation from her mother Demeter, persuaded her husband. "Very well," said Hades, "Eurydice will follow you, but there is a condition. You must walk ahead without looking back until you reach the light. One glance, and she is lost forever." Orpheus, full of joy, agreed. Eurydice, a pale shadow, followed him, guided by the sounds of the lyre. They walked through the dark corridors, past Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, past the judges of the dead, Minos, Aeacus, and Rhadamanthus. Orpheus heard his wife's footsteps behind him, but doubt gnawed at him. What if it was a trick? What if she wasn't following? When the light of the upper world glittered ahead, Orpheus could not bear it. He looked back to confirm her presence. At that moment, Eurydice, reaching out her hands, disappeared into the mist, whispering, "Farewell." Orpheus screamed in agony, trying to return, but the gates of Hades closed to the living for the second time. For 7 days he sat by the entrance, neither eating nor drinking, mourning his loss. Returning to the world, Orpheus was changed. He rejected all joys, drank no wine, ate no meat, avoided women, dedicating himself to the music of sorrow. His songs of love and loss attracted beasts and birds, but repelled people. In Thrace, he settled on Mount Rhodope, where he founded mysteries, secret cults promising bliss in the afterlife through music and purity.
But his solitude angered the Maenads, the wild female followers of Dionysus. In the midst of an orgy, they attacked Orpheus. "You despise us and our god!" Stones and branches thrown at him fell, charmed by the song. But the Maenads drowned out the lyre with their screams and tore Orpheus limb from limb. His head and lyre were thrown into the Hebrus River. But even in death, Orpheus did not fall silent. The head floated down the river, continuing to sing, and the lyre played by itself. The waves carried them to the island of Lesbos, where the head became an oracle, prophesying wisdom. Apollo, his father, protected the relics, and the Muses placed the lyre in the sky as a constellation. Orpheus's soul descended to Elysium, the fields of the blessed in Hades, where he finally reunited with Eurydice. Now they walk together, and Orpheus can look back at her as much as he wishes without fear of loss. The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice is an eternal symbol of art as a bridge between worlds. It inspired Orphism, a philosophical doctrine about the soul, reincarnation, and purification through music, influencing Pythagoras and Plato. In literature and art, this is reflected in Monteverdi's opera Orfeo, Stravinsky's ballet, Titian's paintings, and even in modern films like Black Orpheus. The symbolism of the glance back is a warning about doubt destroying hope. The lyre is a reminder of the power of creativity. The myth of Icarus, the wings of freedom, and the fall of pride. In the whirlwind of ancient Greek legends, where human ingenuity borders on the divine and ambition often leads to tragedy, surfaces the story of Icarus, a youth whose flight became a symbol of audacity and the limit of human dreams. This myth, vividly described in Ovid's Metamorphoses and mentioned in the works of Hyginus and Strabo, tells of an attempt to overcome the shackles of fate through intellect and craft, but also of the price paid for ignoring warnings. Icarus was not a god or a hero with a sword. He was the son of a brilliant craftsman whose innocent joy of freedom turned into a fall into the abyss. This saga is a warning about hubris, where the sun, which gives life, can become a punishing fire, and the sky a trap for the too bold. Let us analyze this parable of flight and fall step by step to feel the wind of freedom and the bitterness of loss. Daedalus, the greatest inventor of Athens, was a craftsman whose hands performed wonders, from statues that seemed like alive to mechanisms that tricked the eye. He lived in Athens, but jealousy of the talent of his nephew Talos, who invented the saw and the potter's wheel, pushed Daedalus to crime. He threw the youth from the Acropolis, staging an accident. The goddess of wisdom, patroness of the city, exiled him. Daedalus fled to Crete, where he was welcomed by King Minos, who valued his art. There Daedalus created many marvels,
dancing statues, automatons, and the labyrinth for the games. He had a son, Icarus, by the slave Naucrates, a youth with a lively mind and curiosity, who helped his father in the workshop. But Daedalus's talent became his curse. Minos, angered by his wife Pasiphae for her shame, imprisoned Daedalus and Icarus in a high tower on the island so they would not reveal the secrets of his palace. Guards watched them, and the sea surrounded them like an impregnable wall. Daedalus, longing for his homeland, began secretly collecting feathers falling from passing birds, eagles, falcons, and gulls. In the workshop, lit by the moon, Daedalus fastened the feathers with thread, sealing them with candle wax and honey. He crafted 2 pairs of wings, large ones for himself, smaller ones for his son. "These are our wings of freedom," he whispered to Icarus. "But remember, do not fly too low so that the moisture of the sea does not dampen the feathers, and not too high so that the sun does not melt the wax. Keep to the middle. Follow me." Icarus, full of delight, tried on the wings, flapping his arms and feeling the air lift him. "Father, we will be like gods," he exclaimed, unaware of the risks. At night, when the guards were asleep, father and son climbed to the roof of the tower.
Daedalus tied the wings to his son's shoulders, kissed him, and said, "Do not look back in fear. Look only ahead." They jumped into the void, and a miracle happened. The wings caught the wind, and they soared above the waves, as if Icarus and Daedalus had become new beings, demigods of the air. Fishermen in boats, seeing them, mistook them for gods. Shepherds on the cliffs prayed, thinking it was a sign. The flight was magical. They passed the islands of Samos, Delos, and Peros, where Apollo was once born. Daedalus flew steadily, following the wind. But Icarus, intoxicated by the height, forgot his father's command. "How beautiful the world is from above," he thought. "I am higher than the birds, closer to the sun." He soared upward, ignoring his father's cries. The sun, scorching at its zenith, melted the wax. Feathers began to detach, like leaves in a storm. "Icarus, come down!" Daedalus shouted, but it was too late. The wings disintegrated, and the youth, flailing his arms, plummeted downward like a stone. He fell into the sea with a cry of "Father!" and the waves closed over him. Daedalus, in despair, circled above the water, calling his son, but found only floating feathers. The sea where he drowned was named the Icarian Sea, and the nearest island was Icaria, in his honor. Daedalus, broken by grief, flew to Sicily, where King Cocalus sheltered him. There he created new wonders, artificial lakes, temples, and mechanical guards. But Minos, learning of the fugitive, arrived with his fleet, demanding his extradition. Cocalus cunningly lured Minos into a bath, where the king's daughters, on Daedalus's advice, scalded him with boiling water from pipes invented by the craftsman. Daedalus lived in honor, but mourned his son until the end of his days, creating a statue of Icarus with outstretched arms. The gods, taking pity, transformed Daedalus into a partridge, a bird afraid of heights, so he would remember the fall. The myth of Icarus is an eternal reminder of measure. The aspiration to the stars is commendable, but without prudence, it leads to collapse. It explains the names of the seas and islands in the Aegean basin and inspired the concept of Icarian flight, daring but doomed. In art, from Bruegel's paintings, where Icarus's fall goes unnoticed by the world, to sculptures in literature, it is a symbol of youthful impulsivity. And now we come to the end of our journey through the labyrinths of ancient Greek myths, a world where gods descend from Olympus, heroes battle monsters, and ordinary mortals learn the lessons of fate, love, and hubris. These stories, born millennia ago, still live in our hearts, reminding us of eternal questions. Who are we in this cosmos? What does it mean to be human? And how do we find harmony in chaos? The myths of Greece are not just tales, but a mirror to our soul, inspiring art, literature, and philosophy around the world. Thank you for being with us on this epic adventure. If the myths have ignited a spark of curiosity in you, share your favorite stories in the comments. Subscribe so you don't miss new videos.
And until we meet again in the world of legends.